Hello and welcome to the Moms Who Know podcast. I'm your host, Chanel Nielsen, and today we are going to talk about habits. Now, as I've been preparing for today's podcast, I recognize that habits is not the most exciting, thing as you think about what you want to learn about, but I want you to consider how important habits are in your life. Studies have shown that anywhere from 40 up to 90% of what you do every day is done by your habits. So that means that all day, as you go throughout your day, you're doing things a certain way, or the things that you do themselves are done because of habits. And if you don't believe that, think for just a minute about what you do every morning when you get out of bed. You probably, get out of bed and do a certain thing, put on your slippers first, or you go to the bathroom first, or whatever. And you probably do that in pretty much the same way every single day. When you get in the car to drive, you probably have a series of little habits that you do. For me, I get my keys off the hook, I take my slippers off, I put my outside shoes on, I get in the car, I shut the door, I put on the seatbelt, I turn on the key, I put down the emergency brake, I open the garage, then I turn the key. Just a simple little thing. I'm not thinking through each step of what I need to do. It's just done by habit. This is what I do when I get in the car. And probably most of us are familiar with being on autopilot. Like when you drive somewhere and your brain kind of shuts off and then you miss your exit or you find yourself going the way you always go, that's habit taking over. That is you not having to actively think. And sometimes it's not where you want to go and you need to be actively thinking, but basically your habit is carrying you along. So what I call habit is just kind of that one step, and what I call routine is several little habits linked together. So my morning routine is a series of little habits, one after the other, and I do them in a certain way, and that is a routine. But each of those pieces of the routine are a habit. So I wanted to share this story. This is a super sad story, but it has a happy ending. So there was this woman in Arizona a few years back, and she had just had her fourth baby. And she went shopping with three of her kids. One was in school, and she had three of her kids. And she was at the store and had her toddler in a cart, but the cart didn't have a buckle to buckle her toddler in. So normally what she would do is she had her new baby and she would put her new baby in the car first, and then she'd put her toddler in, and then she'd help her third child buckle. Her oldest was at school. So she had her routine. Well, because this day, in the cart didn't have a buckle, her toddler, as we all know, toddlers don't always want to stay in the cart without a buckle, and so he was trying to climb out. And so she switched up her routine and she put her toddler in the car first. And then she buckled her next older child, and then she got in the car and drove away. And she left her newborn baby in the parking lot. Luckily, someone found this baby, brought the baby into the store. The baby was fine, but this woman got so much grief. She actually had driven around for a long time, and then one of her kids said, "Where's the baby, Mom?" And she was like, "What are you talking about?" And then looked behind and realized her baby wasn't there and panicked. And I felt so much compassion for this woman because I get it. That's what we do. We live our life in habits, and she just was, doing her routine, and especially as a mom with a tiny newborn baby. But I just bring that up because it's so easy to see how our habit is kind of not controlling us, but running the show. And that's a good thing because we don't want to have to think through each step of, brushing our teeth. What do I do next? Do I put on the toothpaste next? Or, how you do it. It's great that our brains just take over and run on autopilot, but we want to make sure that our habits are serving us. and that we're not a slave to our habits. That allows us to, have the ability to change at any point, and we can change those habits, but we need to be aware of our habits before we can change them. So I have a great quote here. This is by Jim Rohn. He says, "Success is a few simple disciplines practiced every day, while failure is simply a few errors in judgment repeated every day." So the thing about habits is, because you're doing them every single day, they really add up. The whole idea is that what we do every day is what we become. And you've probably heard the saying, right? We've all heard, you are what you eat. I would say you aren't what you eat. Like if you go and eat a hot fudge sundae just once, that's not going to affect you that much. What it really is, we are what we repeatedly eat. And in the bigger conversation of habits, we aren't just what we do once. If you decide to, go do this amazing, miraculous thing, but you do it once and you don't repeat it, that doesn't really change you. What changes us is the repeating, the consistency, doing it over and over. So for an example, if you want to be a runner and you go out one day and you run 5 miles, but you never run again, that's not really going to have a big impact in your life. But if you decide to take up running and you start running every single day, that's where the magic comes in. That is the power of consistency, the power of habit. So if you think about your life, whatever you want to do in your life or whatever you want to be or accomplish, it really starts with habit. It starts with making a daily change every single day. And this goes for character traits, like attributes that you want to have. You want to be kinder. This goes for things that you want to do, like the example of being a runner, or, I want to eat more healthy foods. I want to write a book. All these things that don't happen in one day. We need to consistently work on them day after day after day. So the other magic of habits is that habits make things easy. They're just this pattern, like I mentioned earlier, of autopilot, where we're not having to think through it every day, and our habits carry us along. Now, if we have a good habit set up, that is magic, because we can set up a habit that carries us right down that road that we want to be on. And that's what we're really going to talk about in this podcast today. How do we set up those habits to bring us to where we want to go, instead of just letting life kind of happen to us and just, not being too concerned about the destination and living in habits that we haven't consciously set up. So, all right, another quote. "Habits take the effort out of our daily tasks. They are the ultimate form of ease. We do what needs to be done without having to will ourselves to do it." And I didn't write down who said that, but I think it was Christine Carter. So habits take the effort out of our daily task. They make things easy. They help us to do the things that we want to do in an easy way without our having to think about that, about make a decision every time. Do I want to run today? No, you don't have to decide. That's what you do. It's on your schedule. You just go and you do it. But a lot of us are continually fighting this battle between ourselves. So what happens typically is we'll set a goal, and I'm going to keep going with running for an example. Although, truth be told, I'm not a runner, and this is not one of my goals. I do like to walk. I like to go outside and walk, but that's about as fast as I go. Anyway, let's say you want to be a runner. So you decide, okay, I am going to start running. And at first you have a lot of motivation, and so you're able to get out there and you're able to run. But what happens when the weather is too cold, or the weather is too hot, or you're just feeling tired that day, or you're sore from yesterday's run, or any of these things? Whenever those obstacles come up, they chip away at your motivation. And instead of relying on habits, you have been relying on motivation. And that's that, yes, I want to do it feeling. Motivation's great, but the problem with motivation is it doesn't last. And a lot of times it doesn't last very long at all, and it doesn't last long enough for us to set up a habit. So how do we get over that motivation factor and not staying motivated enough to keep up with our habits? I have 4 ideas for you that we're going to go over today that are going to help you to really be able to create these habits. So, number 1, start small. A lot of times it's so easy because we have big goals and big dreams, and we have visions of things we want to do, and it's so easy to want to start big. In the running example, we are going to go out and we're going to run for several miles, and we think that that's the way to do it, right? Like, yes, I am a runner, I'm going to go do all this. But because we run so much that first day, we need even more motivation. We need a lot of motivation to do it the second day. So Greg McKeown, he is the author of the book Essentialism. He talks about starting small, and I love his example in the book. He says he has a journaling habit, and he's been a journaler for about 10 years. But when he started, then the key to his success, he says, was starting small. So when he started journaling, instead of journaling a page or 2 pages and writing down everything, he wrote just a little bit, and he wrote less than he wanted to do. So he really started so small that to do it the next day didn't take a lot of motivation because he already knew he was just going to do a little bit. So that is one way to take the motivation out of it. Another thing that does when you do less than you want to do is it gives you excitement to continue this on the next day. If you only wrote a few sentences in your journal, but you had so many things you wanted to say, you would be excited and ready to start journaling again tomorrow. And then you do the same thing. Just write a couple sentences, a little bit less than you wanted to do, and every day continue that. It takes a while for our brains to develop a habit. You've probably heard that it takes 21 days to develop a habit. Studies show that it's actually closer to about 100 days to develop a habit that sticks and a habit that lasts. So we really don't, for the most part, have 100 days of motivation in us. We need this habit to be formed. We need to really rely on getting our brain in sync and letting our minds work for us. And so that is one very important way, is to start small. Another way that starting small helps is it sets us up for a win. Because when things come up and you've had a long day and you have your journal there, or you just don't know what to write in your journal, it can be easy if you've said, I am going to write a full page every day in my journal. It can be easy to fail at that. You don't have enough time. You don't have enough to write. You don't want to do it. You just, it just doesn't happen. But if your goal is so small that, you almost can't fail at it, and you've really set yourself up for success in that way, you are going to keep doing it. And that's what builds the habit. And as you continue to do just a little bit every day, not only are you building up, say, writing skills or muscles needed for running, those kind of physical and mental skills, you're also building your habit muscle. You are getting stronger at doing this habit every day, and it becomes easier and easier and easier. And that is going to keep you consistently progressing and consistently moving forward and seeing, change and seeing progress on your habit. Number 2 is called the Tiny Habits Formula. And this is something by Professor BJ Fogg. And he talks about this formula that I love it. You may have heard me talk about it before. And it's a 3-part formula, and it's what is needed for a habit. So there are 3 things. First, a trigger. Second, a habit, the habit itself, the behavior, and third is the reward. So we're going to go through what each of these are and how they work as we're trying to create a habit. And this goes back to, we'll tie it in with starting small. So first, the trigger. This is the cue that lets you know what habit you want to do. So when you're setting up a habit, you want to link this to something you're already doing or something that is already happening in your day, in your life. So it can be a time of day, it can be when something happens, but it's something that's already in place. So for an example, you could add a habit to brushing your teeth. This is something that you already do every day, and so you can add something using brushing your teeth as a trigger. So we'll come back to this. We'll talk a little more about brushing your teeth, but then the habit itself, and this goes along with starting small. In BJ Fogg's method, you start so small that it requires no motivation to do. It is a tiny, tiny habit. So one thing that he recommends is flossing one tooth. It's so small. How could, one tooth, like you got this. If that's something you want to work on, it's something that's so easy that you're not going to say, oh, I just don't feel like doing that. I'm not going to do that tonight. Like, no, you're going to floss one tooth. You can do that. And then immediately after, give yourself a reward. So the reward, it needs to be right away, and it needs to be very simple. I'm not talking about have a hot fudge sundae because you flossed one tooth. I'm talking about yay, or a pat on the back, or just, a big smile at yourself in the mirror. It can be super cheesy, but it needs to be something that you are rewarding yourself because your brain likes that. And when you give your brain that little reward and it knows it did a good job, it wants to repeat the behavior. So trigger, habit, and reward. So any habit that you want to do, we talked about in the first key to setting up these habits, starting small. In this method, you want to start so small that it's tiny. It almost seems like, man, am I even making progress with this habit? And the truth is, no, you're not at this point making a lot of progress. What you're doing is setting yourself up with a habit that's going to last so that in a month, 6 months, a year, you still have this habit. You're still doing this behavior. So this tiny habits method might almost seem like, well, why? I want to do more. But the truth is, look at the things you've tried to do. New Year's resolutions are a good example. We have these ideas of things that we want to do, and yet we don't always stick with them. What would it be like? How much more powerful would it be if you did a little now and you were still doing it a year later than the opposite of doing a lot for a short amount of time? The results come from consistency. And I want you to think about the power of that for a second, because I think a lot of resistance comes up in our mind because we feel like, well, flossing one tooth, what good is that going to do? I might as well just not do anything. But the truth is, if you floss one tooth every day and you normally aren't flossing at all, then you have been flossing your teeth, and your teeth are going to be much better off than if you had not flossed, which is kind of the opposite of what happens. We just don't floss. And we'll talk about in step 4, increasing your tiny habit, because I'm not meaning to say that that's all you're ever going to do is floss one tooth. But as far as habit formation goes and getting that as a daily practice, that's where we want to start. So think about anything that you wish was in your life. That might be reading scriptures or doing exercise or being kinder to your family. Maybe for you, it's, I want to spend more time with each of my kids individually, but it just feels so overwhelming. Coming from a mom of 5 kids, I get that. So, maybe I will make a goal, a tiny habit. I will spend 1 minute alone with each child. And that is powerful. If it's more than what you're doing right now, it's powerful. And if you create it as a habit and you do it every day, that will yield results. Now, the third key in creating habits is obstacles. And what I mean by this is, what happens when you try to set this new habit, you have something new you want to work on, and you mess up? Because inevitably, this is life. We all mess up. None of us are doing this perfectly. So what happens when you have that habit in mind? You're going to go run. You've decided to make it really small. You're just going to run around the block. You're going to run to the mailbox and back. Whatever it is, but you don't do it. A lot of times when we mess up, there's just this mean guy, this mean voice in our minds that says, "You idiot, why couldn't you do that? You had the tiniest goal and you still didn't do it." And we feel really bad. And so because of that, sometimes we don't even want to start. When we're that mean to ourselves, it can keep us from trying new things because we fear hearing that voice. And when we don't start anything, that voice has less ammunition. So I want to challenge you to do something a little bit different when you mess up. There's two things that can help with this. First of all is to really observe. When you don't follow through, when you don't do what you said you were going to do, when some life gets in the way and something happens to keep you from doing what you wanted to do, take a step back, kind of try to take the emotion out of it and think, okay, why? Why did this happen? And how can I do better next time? It's not about shame, it's about learning. When you mess up and when you don't complete the habit you wanted to do, it really allows you a time to learn more about yourself and more about what is in place or isn't in place that needs to be to get you to continue on with this habit. So as an example, for me, I like to eat really healthy. I like to eat a lot of vegetables. I like to, feel good about the foods that I'm eating. But I have noticed, there's a time of day in the late afternoon that sometimes I'm so hungry that I will eat anything. I don't care if it's healthy, whatever, give me the chocolate. Well, I do eat chocolate. I eat the healthy kind of chocolate. I eat chocolate every day, so I don't want you to think that that's not happening. That is just a little square of dark chocolate. But sometimes I eat like half a bar of dark chocolate or something else that my kids have in the house or just food that's not optimal for me. And I took a step back. Instead of beating myself up about it, what I was able to do is take a step back and say, okay, what is really happening here? On these days that I'm eating so much, why? What's the pattern? What can I learn from this? And you know what I observed? If I space out my meals too far, if there's 6 hours between lunch and dinner, that's too much for me. I need to eat every few hours. And if I eat when I'm a little bit hungry, I'm going to make healthier choices. But if I wait until I'm ravenous, get out of my way because I need some food. So that for me has been a nice learning experience because if my goal is to have a lot of vegetables every day, then I need to do it when I'm a little hungry and not when I'm starving. And so really observing what's going on. Why didn't I go for a run today? Well, I was really tired. And you can look back, well, why was I so tired? I didn't get to bed until, midnight last night. So of course I was tired and of course I didn't want to go on a run. And so when you observe what's happening, you can course correct. And you can say, okay, I need to go to bed earlier so that I have the energy to run. And that is setting me up for success. And that's the next principle, is to set yourself up for success next time. Look at what went wrong and set yourself up for next time. See what is not working and fix it. Instead of beating yourself up, instead of willing yourself through it and pushing through with motivation, because I think that's what happens sometimes. And I'm going to go back to my example of kind of an unhealthy snack in the late afternoon. A lot of times it's easy to just beat yourself up and be like, oh gosh, what is my problem? Why can't I eat healthy? Tomorrow I'm just going to, drink a lot of water at that time and I'm not going to go in the kitchen. It doesn't matter if I'm starving. I'm going to muscle my way through this. That might last for a day or two, but with eventually our physiology is going to win. We're going to go back to the kitchen. We're going to eat something because our body is screaming at us to. So learning to really understand what's going on puts us back in the driver's seat, puts us back in control, and then we're able to make these habits stick because we're solving the problem. Step number 4 in creating habits is about increasing your tiny habits. So after you have had a little habit going for a while and you're doing this tiny habit and it's small, but it is consistent and you can feel good that it's consistent, but maybe you're ready to see a little bit more progress. So I have a great quote. This is from Christine Carter. She says this: "Once you feel the pull of your unambitious habit, you feel yourself automatically going to sit in your meditation chair or heading to the treadmill or ordering a side salad at lunch, take another tortoise step. Meditate for an additional minute, or walk for an additional 30 steps, or think about replacing your after lunch double caramel macchiato with a lower in sugar latte. And then once this feels easy peasy, add a little tiny something else to your routine. Remember that if you resist the urge to be more ambitious or to do more, you'll increase your odds of being successful over the long haul." So I love her concept here of that feeling. When do you feel like you want to increase it? And I think that speaks to me so much because I think you guys know I am a yoga instructor. And one of the things that we see in teaching yoga, when people first come into yoga, they try to force their body into these poses. Maybe they can't quite touch their toes, but darn it, they're going to try. And they lean over and they try to touch their toes. And the body's natural response, if you're trying to overstretch it, is to clench up and not let you do it. That's smart of our bodies. Our bodies are really smart like that. It's protecting itself. But if you relax into it, relax into the pose, and just let your body be where it wants to be, it will slowly open up so that after 10 days, 30 days more of doing yoga, what was impossible now is available to you, and it's open, and it's a matter of it's going where your body wanted to go. This same thing happens with our habits. So we need to feel what feels right to us. So when we start with a really small run around the block, and we're doing that every day, and it's just a little less than we want to do at the beginning, right? Going back to starting small, doing a little less than we wanted to do. Eventually, we're going to feel like this is so easy. I am so strong from running around the block. I want to do more. I want to do more than this. And then you take it to the next level. You run 2 blocks maybe, or a block and a half, or a block, and then you run to your mailbox and back. Maybe it's even tinier increments than that. But if you do increase, as you increase, if you listen to what you actually want to do, again, we're taking the motivation out of it. We're setting ourselves up with a habit, and it becomes just so powerful because we keep on doing it. Another way that I increase my habits, and that has really worked for me, is to have a range of possibilities. And what I mean by that is, instead of saying, I'm going to do yoga for a half hour every morning, I say my goal, my process, my daily plan is I'm going to do yoga every day for at least 1 minute up to a half hour, 45 minutes, depending on the amount of time I have. But what's powerful about that to me is that even on my hardest days, if I'm sick or whatever the case may be, if I just do a few minutes of yoga, I have accomplished it. I've set myself up to win. But if I want to go farther, if I'm having a good day and I feel great, I can. And so I'm allowing that variation in my life. And yet, no matter if I do 1 minute of yoga or I do 30 minutes of yoga, either way, I have succeeded and I've done what I needed to do that morning. And so as we increase, we don't want to increase the pressure on ourselves. We set ourselves up for success because with habits, we want to feel good, and our brain responds to that, and we respond to that, and that's what keeps us going with our habits. If they feel good, if they work for us. So we want to create habits that are going to work. So a quick recap. First of all, make a specific plan. What do you want to have happen in your life? You want to journal, you want to run, you want to read your scriptures, whatever it is. And then start really small. That's key number one. Keep it very simple. Number two is using that formula, trigger, habit, reward. What are you already doing? A time of day, a timer you can set, brushing your teeth, something you already have as a habit that you can link to this behavior that you want to do. And what little tiny immediate and simple reward are you going to give yourself? Number three, plan for obstacles. When you have a hard day, when things come up, when you mess up, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to make it so it's better next time? And number four is to slowly increase your habit, letting your habit kind of be in charge, letting it dictate when it's time. Instead of forcing it and willing it to grow, you just kind of naturally and organically let that happen. And I promise you that as you do that, you are going to see so many changes in your life because you're going to stick with it. This isn't something you're going to do for a short amount of time. This is something that will change your life. And that's what we're after. We're after becoming. We're after learning and growing. And that comes from those simple habits. I'm going to repeat the quote that I started with at the beginning. This is Jim Rohn. Success is a few simple disciplines practiced every day, while failure is simply a few errors in judgment repeated every day. So I want to say, choose those few simple disciplines, make them yours, and you will see changes in your life because of changing your habits. Thanks for being here today, guys. I appreciate you listening. If you haven't already, go and join the conversation on Instagram and Facebook at Moms Who Know Podcast, and I will see you guys next week.